Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD bodybuilder, back with another video. Today we're going to be answering an age-old question in bodybuilding. Free weights or machines? Free weights are those that move independently in space, like barbells and dumbbells. There are a lot of people out there who swear by free weight training and say that it's far better than machine type movements. On the other hand, there are also bodybuilders who will say that machines are superior to free weights in a lot of ways. Quick outline for today, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of free weight and machine type movements. We'll start off by talking about free weights, then we'll go on to machines, and finally I'll put everything together to give you some recommendations on which one you should be focusing on. If you've been getting value from my channel, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. Okay, let's start off by talking about free weight movements. Starting off with the pros of free weight movements. First of all, these often involve more muscle mass. This doesn't matter as much when you talk about small muscle groups like biceps, triceps, and shoulders. But for a lot of cases, when you're using free weight movements, you end up using more muscle mass overall. Often this is because for the big muscle groups, free weight movements tend to allow you to use more joints and use more range of motion. This does depend on the types of exercises you choose. For example, comparing a squat to a leg press. The squat is a heavy free weight movement that involves a lot of muscle mass. And the leg press doesn't involve as much musculature as the squat does. Part of this is because the leg press doesn't give you as much lower back involvement. If you didn't want to think about it too much, free weights are usually a good bet in terms of overall stimulus. And the power of this is that it makes your training more time efficient. Often, beginners don't spend that much time in the gym anyways, and they often don't see results because they aren't using their time effectively. Next advantage of free weight training is that you have more stabilizer recruitment. When your body is forced to move a free weight through space, it involves more stabilizing muscles. For example, the core, scapular stabilizers, or just other muscles that are being fired isometrically to keep you stable. This is nice because it involves more muscle mass and can help prevent imbalances. Next pro of free weight training is that it's more applicable for strength development. If you want to have a big squat, bench, and deadlift, focusing on heavy free weight movements is going to have more carryover into those. Lastly, free weight training is more functional overall. So if you're an athlete or you just want to be stronger for daily activities, using free weights is going to be more functional. Okay, now let's talk about the cons of free weight training. First of all, when you're using free weights, there's usually more technique involved. For a lot of machines, the path that you take through space is predetermined, so it's not as technically demanding to get from point A to point B. Sometimes getting into the heavy free weight movements is daunting for beginners because they aren't so sure about their technique, and in these cases it can be helpful to get a friend to teach you the movements at the beginning. The other disadvantage of free weight movements is that there's more fatigue generated, and they can be more mentally taxing. In the cases that I mentioned before, where free weight movements do involve more muscle mass, you are going to generate more fatigue. A specific type of fatigue that comes into play here is axial fatigue. For example, in heavy squats or deadlifts. I'll emphasize though, if you're a beginner in your first couple of years of serious training, fatigue really shouldn't be an issue. And you really want to be focusing on those exercises that involve the most muscle mass. However, as you become more advanced, like late intermediate and beyond, fatigue will become a limiting factor because your body has a finite amount of recovery resources, and it has to use some of those recovery resources to actually build muscle. And it has to use some of those recovery resources to build muscle and recover for the next sessions. All right, now that we've talked about free weights, let's move on to machines. So starting off with the pros. First of all, with machine type movements, you have unique options for angles, tension curves, and range of motion. That is, machines just offer you to train in ways that are a bit different from free weight options. For example, being able to do pulling movements in a certain angle that you can't do if you didn't have machines. Tension curves also come into play, and these are basically how much force is applied on your muscle at different parts of the movement. Ideally, you want to have a muscle's strength curve, which is where your muscle is strongest in a movement, match the tension curve. If you do an exercise where the toughest part of the exercise is at the weakest point in your muscle's range of motion, then you're going to be losing out on gains because you're going to tap out early in the movement before you've actually maximized your muscle's capability. Lastly, using machines are typically less fatiguing than using free weights. But again, if you're a beginner, don't worry about fatigue. Now that we've talked about the pros of machine type movements, let's talk about the cons. First of all, with machine movements, you will sometimes have less muscle mass involved, and thus less overall stimulus. As I said, you can get around this with intelligent exercise choice, but in some cases, for example, a deadlift, it's going to be hard to have a machine equivalent that has the same potential for overload and thus overall stimulus. Next, with machines, these tend to be less functional and less strength friendly. As we said, machines can be nice when they have a fixed path of movement. However, this also constrains you in some ways and makes this training have less carryover to real life movements. Last con of machine exercises is that they're going to be less available. If you're training at home, it can be really expensive to start buying machines, especially since each machine is usually only good for one exercise or a few exercises. The other aspect of this though is that free weight movements are going to be easier to just execute the same way when you travel. For example, if you love using a certain back machine at the gym, when you travel or go to other gyms, you may not have the same machine. This isn't a problem if you're just doing it once in a while, but if you travel a lot, then it can be an issue because you really want to be keeping the same exercises in your program consistently for at least about 3 months or so to actually see progress. Okay, now that we've talked about the pros and cons of free weight and machine type movements, let's give you some recommendations. First of all, for beginners or those in their first 1 to 2 years of serious training, I would recommend that you focus on heavy free weight movements, especially for the big muscle groups. This is because if you're just getting started and you're not an expert on training anatomy and strength curves, free weight movements are going to be a good bet to make sure that you hit the most amount of muscle mass. This applies especially for the big muscle groups like chest, back, and legs. A good way to build the core of your program is think about the 6 main movement patterns used in bodybuilding. That is the squat, hip hinge, horizontal pull, vertical pull, horizontal press, and vertical press. If you focus on heavyweight training in these movement patterns, you're going to have a lot of your bases covered. Now, if you really want to maximize hypertrophy, especially if you're short on time, these are going to have the most bang for your buck. I'd recommend using machine type movements for specific applications. For the small muscle groups like biceps, triceps, and side delts, using machines isn't going to have that much of a difference than using free weights. That is the amount of muscle mass and stabilization involved. However, with machines, you will be able to access unique angles and strength tension curves. Now, there are going to be a couple examples where machines are superior. For example, with leg extensions, there has been research showing that you get better activation of your rectus femoris, which is one of your quadricep muscles. And with leg curls, you can get better activation of your biceps femoris, which is one of your hamstrings. So in these cases, machines are really nice to have. A few more recommendations. If you're training at home, I would recommend that you buy free weights first for your home gym. First, putting your money into adjustable dumbbells, a bench, a barbell and plates, and a squat rack is going to get you the most bang for your buck, the most versatility, and will make sure you're able to focus on the most efficient movements. Next, I would focus your program on free weights if you travel a lot or you change gyms often. In these cases, free weight training is just going to be easier to carry over from place to place. Lastly, as you become more advanced, like intermediate and beyond, you will start to use more and more machine type movements for better stimulus to fatigue ratio. The stimulus to fatigue ratio is how much muscle building stimulus you get for each unit of fatigue generated. Certain exercises like the squat will generate a lot of stimulus, but also a lot of fatigue. This isn't a problem if you're a beginner and you're using low volumes, like say 10 sets per week or less per muscle group. But as you get to higher volumes, like more than 15 or 20 sets a week, fatigue will start to become a bigger and bigger player. You'll see advanced bodybuilders start to incorporate movements that minimize axial fatigue. Examples would include hack squats, leg presses, and chest supported rows. That's all for now, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you smash the like button and leave me a comment below. In particular, are there any machine type movements that you think are essential to use for bodybuilders? Let me know. If you want to learn more about training for strength, check out these videos where I talk about some aspects of strength versus hypertrophy training. And if you've been getting value from my channel, make sure you subscribe and share the channel with your fitness friends so they can benefit from it too. See you next time.